I think there was an immediate cause, but I also think in any career it's a gradual a change in path when you do it. The immediate cause was at the end of 2014. My mother died, and about a half a year later, when I was cleaning out her home in the linen closet, I found gauzes in all different sizes and weights and thicknesses and weaves in her linen closet, and we're talking almost a garbage bag full. So I immediately thought, well, I'm going to toss it. And then I realized, no, well, I'm going to keep some. And I don't even understand why I even did that, which is kind of weird in and of itself. And these are bandages that she had squirreled away, still in their wrapping from the various rehab facilities and hospitals she had been in and out of over I would say, the last 5 or so years of her life. And so I saved it, and then when I was cleaning her home out further, 6 months later, and going over her things, I gradually realized I had been doing children's book writing, illustration, art directing, type design, that for most of my life, since my early 20s. And I started out as a fine arts painter, and then I realized that I have to return home because if it's not now, when? And because life, as we all deal with time, and there's so much time we have. So I returned to where I came from, really. That was a gradual path. And then the last 2 years I've been painting nonstop and even still doing books, but I haven't been choosing to do the art on them. I think another outgrowth of was that I did a book called Masterpiece, which was about a mouse that lived in a museum, and then gradually finds out from the stuffy area of the old furniture and antique furniture, and in my mind it was the Met. She discovers modern art and then has her own show. My mother took me when I was 5 years old for lessons at the Met every weekend, and then afterwards we would go to the Egyptian wing, see the entire museum. I kind of knew it by heart. Whenever I go back, it feels like home to me. I feel very comfortable there. It's probably also a connection with my mother. So that book, The Masterpiece, came out in 2012, and I dedicated it to my mother. And so that too was an influence of, life, has all these little, tendrils, and you don't know the path that you're going to go on. It's expansive. In 1995, we started traveling to other countries when I was asked to speak on my books. And I started visiting those countries, and a lot of them started visiting mosques, started seeing old synagogues. A lot of them were in the Mideast and in Africa. And I started doing, after September 11th, a series of peace books. So out of that, in 2006, I did the last of this trilogy of peace books. And I started going back to my abstract painting. And I had studied with amazing, men, and I will say men because when I was going to school, there weren't any women teaching. I didn't have one. And
can you name some of those artists you studied with?
Yeah. Well, Herbach was a German chemist who helped invent acrylics, and he worked it with. He had been a student of Joseph Albers, and he worked in color theory. He taught me that, and color field, and that was what I did. And I started out with grid paintings, and my senior project was with initials and graphics and typography. And then I also had a teacher, Marvin Bielik, who had been runner-up for a Caldecott, who worked the opposite way with a brush that I still work with, a 000 brush on opaline parchment. And so I started imitating my teacher's styles before they became my own. My two-dimensional art teacher was Richard Serra, who's a sculptor now, pretty famous, but at the time he was not as famous. A lot of the teachers were teaching at Yale, but they were also teaching at Queens College where I went because they was closer to their lofts in the city and they could earn an additional living. So I had really good foundation. It's interesting because later on when I went back to Queens College, the curator was talking about doing a show on my work in the museum there. They were beginning a museum. She brought me to the stacks and I saw their work. And it was amazing to me after all these years of doing about 50 books of looking back and thinking, and I'm not referring to Marvin Bielek, who really worked like Dürer, really. I wasn't as impressed as I had been as a student. It was really very surprising, that, you learn as you go along the way. I'd work hunched over a drafting table, working like this, very, very meticulously to the point where I would, go to sleep with braces on my arms at night, neck braces. I mean, it was like being an athlete. And it was a lot of work. It was a real change and a wonderful feeling to be able to stand up and work, play really loud rock music, to play, I can't work to classical music. And I also, when I started doing the paintings, I started oddly playing my parents' old music. So I did a lot of them to Louis Armstrong and Billie Holiday, and then I started playing some of the, one of my sons was in a band and I'm playing his, DVD and CD, whatever, and just, a lot of the Cajun music behind, which gets me, revved up and going. So it wasn't that like sitting in a chair still, you could kind of almost dance for it. It's utter joy. It felt like a more adult act for me, oddly, than doing the children's book. In the painting, I work standing up and I rotate the canvas. It's not like Jackson Pollock did, but I'm doing there's a lot more physicality and motion in a different way. I started working with oils and acrylics and sand and dirt and seeds and Windex and vinegar and baking soda and Comic and Clorox. So I started thinking, even put lint in from the dryer. I started thinking I'm making a feminist statement because I started using even some of my mother's old household products. I didn't throw those out. Those have been going into some of the mixing with the paint and then doing it with plastic and gesso and all sorts of things so it stays stable. So it's just been a very growing experimental kind of opportunity. Even some of the newer paintings. One of my daughter-in-laws is knitting for me. I bought copper metal because I thought of what other kind of materials could I use beside the gauze. But there's something ethereal that I love about the gauze, because not only can gauze, at first I thought, oh, gauze in a painting, that's really weird. It's like a wound and it's soaking up blood. But then I thought about it and I thought, well, gauze can also heal a wound and it can help you heal. So maybe in some psychological way, I was doing both for myself through the painting to heal. And I've always worked very, very, very hard and been dedicated to art. Since my mother started taking me, and this actually since I could hold up a crayon. And I'm sure there are psychological reasons for that, because anyone who chooses to spend most of their life alone with themselves in a room, but doesn't feel lonely, that addresses something. And I think that addresses anybody who does a creative act, because initially it starts with them alone and nobody else. So, and you're doing it for yourself. And that's the way it should be.